Jerami Grant was the Portland Trail Blazers' big offseason acquisition during last year's offseason. The Blazers traded a 2025 Milwaukee first, as well as swapped around a couple second-round picks in order to get the former Detroit Piston. Going into the season, there was a lot of hype surrounding Jerami Grant. Damian Lillard finally seemed to have gotten his two-way scoring forward. Here's some of the things I was saying about Jerami Grant headed into the season. Now he comes to Portland, where I think he will function more as an offensive cog than he did in Oklahoma City or Denver, but he's obviously not going to have the same role and the same usage rate that he had in Detroit. So it'll be interesting to see what happens to his efficiency numbers. I'll have goals for him later on. Also, I think he can be a good fit off the ball. Having a forward that can not only knock down threes to space the court, but also likes to cut and has the athleticism to finish around the rim should make him a seamless off-ball fit, and maybe a better off-ball fit at a forward position than the Blazers have had in years. Al-Farouq Aminu and Mo Harkless weren't the best three-point shooters. Robert Covington was very inconsistent in that regard, and he wasn't a guy who cut much, and then he had his troubles finishing the ball. Jerami Grant doesn't have those issues. He's a good role player because he can do things with and without the ball. It'll just be interesting to see what his offensive role is and how much he has the ball in his hands compared to his previous stops, obviously in OKC, Denver, and then Detroit. I don't think Jerami Grant is quite as good defensively as a lot of people hype him up to be. He's definitely not bad. He's definitely a good defensive piece. Off the ball, I think he's great. I think Jerami Grant is truly a good team defender. On the ball, he's a bit of a mixed bag. He certainly has the foot speed to stay in front of a lot of players, but the issue with Jerami Grant on the defensive end in regards to putting him up against guards especially, but just stars in general, is star players run a ton of pick and rolls. Jerami Grant really struggles getting through pick and rolls. There was a lot of people that hyped up his defense in the bubble, how Jerami Grant was a lockdown defensive player and looked amazing and this and that, and I went back and I watched 4 full bubble games to see it for myself after the Blazers traded for Jerami Grant. My biggest takeaway was he really struggles getting through on-ball screens. You should definitely look for this season, and I'll let you know if I think he's improved compared to what I saw in the bubble. But I legitimately watched a ton of tape on his defense to try and get a better feel for it so I knew what I was talking about, and he just really sucked getting through on-ball screens. So now let's take a look at his stats. Grant played in almost 36 minutes per game, so these columns are pretty much equal. He averaged over 20 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists. I had a goal of 19 points per 36 minutes for Jerami Grant, as it was going to be interesting to see how much his scoring dropped off after being the guy in Detroit to being one of 3 guys in Portland, with Damian Lillard and Anthony Simons carrying a heavy burden with the offense. Grant surpassed that goal, getting 20.5 points per game. He was the third scorer for the Blazers this year, but the Blazers had 3 scorers averaging above 20 points per game. I also had a goal of 6.5 rebounds per 36 for Grant, as rebounding was a noted weakness of his going into the season, and it still was a weakness of his as he failed to meet that goal, only getting 4.5 boards, which is definitely subpar for a power forward. I also had a goal of 2.5 assists per 36. He was right there at 2.4. And I wanted to see Grant be a defensive playmaker, getting 1.2 steals per 36. He only had 0.8, but part of that could be due to how he was deployed defensively. Here are Grant's shooting numbers. He was relatively efficient all season long. I had a goal of 50% on 2s, and he surpassed that. He was very good attacking the rim especially. I also had a goal of 36.5% from 3, and he blew that out of the water, shooting 40.1%, which is a career high. He was much higher than that even earlier in the season, hovering around 45 to 46%. I also had a goal of a 58% true shooting percentage, and he had a 60.6, so he surpassed that goal as well. The positives for Grant was his three-point shooting. Having a power forward that can shoot threes the way he does was always going to be a positive, but to shoot him at a 40% clip and at the volume that Grant shot him on makes things easier on Damian Lillard, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Damian Lillard had his best season in a year where he got to play next to Jerami Grant for a major part of it. I don't expect Grant to stay above 40% next season. A big part of this percentage was a super hot streak to start the year. However, if he can be right around that in Portland, then that is a major plus on this team. And his three-point shooting helped open up a lot of things for him in terms of attacking closeouts, and his slashing and finishing all year was very solid as well. When the ball got moving, Jerami Grant was a major beneficiary of it numerous times, as he would either get good open threes or he'd be put in the position to attack a oncoming defender. From 0 to 3 feet, Jerami Grant shot 67.6%, and his attacking ability also got him to the free throw line a ton. Although he had higher free throw numbers in Detroit where he was the guy, being an ancillary piece for this Blazers team and still being able to get 5.4 free throw attempts per game was huge for the Portland offense. Portland has never had a guy next to Dame that draws free throws at a high rate, especially at a forward position, and especially as the third scorer. Jusuf Nurkic has had years where he has about 5 free throw attempts per game, but he doesn't shoot them too well. Jerami Grant shot free throws well at 81% this season. He, of course, had that 21 for 28 free throw performance against the New York Knicks, which saw him drop 44 points. And the fourth positive for Grant was his off-ball defense. I still really like Grant playing the backline of a defense as a secondary rim protector, as someone that can play the passing lanes a little bit, and as somebody that, when switched on to guards, can do a solid job. I like Grant in this role going into the season, and after this season, it's all but confirmed how Jerami Grant should be utilized, which is as an off-ball defender. However, as we jump into the negatives, the first negative for Jerami Grant was his screen navigation. And this made him the wrong person to put against the best guards in the league, and it was a mistake that Chauncey Billups made all season long. Grant can slide his feet, although he does get beat off the dribble a bit by some of the better guards in the league. He still can do a solid job for a 4-man against them. However, when guarding star players, Jerami Grant really struggled this year, and it was due to his inability to navigate screens cleanly. Part of this is it's just harder for bigger guys to navigate screens and get through screens, but part of it was also his footwork and just how he attacked the screen in terms of trying to navigate it. On-ball screens gave him fits all season long. We talked about it before the season, and it was a constant theme throughout the season. Eric ranted about Jerami Grant being matched up against some of the better guards in the league who would routinely have big games against this Blazer defense because you took Jerami Grant out of a number of plays because he would get screened out of them. Instead of Jerami Grant potentially being able to help against these guys around the rim as a rim protector, as a help side defender where Grant is best, oftentimes he was screened and then therefore trailing the play. The Blazers have to utilize Jerami Grant better next season in order to become a better defensive team. He is not the answer against the best guards in the league. He can guard some forwards well, had an impressive outing defensively against Kevin Durant, so it's not that he should never be matched up against good offensive players. He just shouldn't be matched up against guys that run a ton of ball screens and rely heavily on them. So for Portland, they probably need to go out and get a small forward that can be their main primary point of attack defender. Or maybe they go big, move Jerami Grant to the 3, and get a big rim protecting power forward, and they go all in on rim protection and allow Anthony Simons and Damian Lillard to overplay the perimeter and funnel guys to Grant, whoever that power forward is, and Jusuf Nurkic presumably. So the Blazers have to do a better job next season of figuring out the defensive role for Jerami Grant. The third negative is his rebounding. For a power forward, he's just simply not a good rebounder and struggled all season long. He doesn't box out enough. He doesn't hold guys off well enough. When guys are physical going after boards, he struggles. And in the playoffs this year, we've seen a lot of teams have success just by out hustling and out muscling guys for boards. We've seen the Phoenix Suns have a couple bad game ones where they got absolutely obliterated on the boards. We saw the Sacramento Kings losing game 7 against the Warriors because they got obliterated on the boards. Jerami Grant is not a good rebounding power forward, and that continued this year, and a lot of times it's very frustrating. He just doesn't have a nose for the ball, and it was made up for the most part, with having Josh Hart as a starting small forward who's a great rebounding wingman, but Jerami Grant needs a good rebounding small forward next to him because his rebounding is subpar. The fourth and final negative is his mid-range. I thought Grant had a lot of moments this year where he settled at times for mid-range when I felt like he could have gotten downhill and gotten to the basket, where he had a much higher chance of getting to the free throw line or a much higher chance of just simply converting shots. When Grant was hot, he would get going from the mid-range, and in those situations I'm fine, but I think Jerami Grant needs to be a little bit more judicious in terms of his mid-range shot selection next season. According to Basketball Reference, Grant shot 43% from 3 to 10 feet, 40% from 10 to 16 feet, and 38% from 16 feet to 3. Jerami Grant actually shot a higher percentage from behind the three-point line than he did from 10 feet out to the three-point line. Jerami Grant took over a third of his shots from 3 feet out to the three-point line as well, and at approximately 40% from 2, that is actually quite inefficient. I'm not as harsh on the mid-range shot as other people are. It is the most inefficient shot in basketball, but a lot of times it can actually help you get to the rim more when your defender has to guard you in the mid-range. It means that when you start driving, they can't just turn around and meet you at the rim. They gotta stay attached to you so you can't pull up from the mid-range. And when Grant would catch the ball 15, 16 feet out, when he could face up and have some time, he was good enough to make defenders respect him, and he was able to get to the rim a bit by pulling those defenders out of the paint to the mid-range area. However, I just think at times he settled too much for mid-range shots that in general weren't efficient enough for defenders to really respect. So the mid-range shot is a tricky thing to analyze, but I wish that Jerami Grant would be a little bit more picky in terms of his shot selection from there. Now let's talk about what's next for Jerami Grant, and what's next is free agency and a payday. A big ol' bag. Jerami Grant's going to get paid. He turned down the biggest contract extension that the Portland Trail Blazers could give him, which was 4 years, $112 million. The rumor is that he's going to get a 5-year, $150 million a year not a year. $150 million a year would be absolutely insane and also illegal according to the CBA. 5 years, $150 million total is what has been rumored for Jerami Grant, which would be $30 million a year. It would probably be backloaded, starting at approximately $25, $26 million next year, and then at the end of his contract be around $34 to $35 million with 8% raises, which are available because he has bird rights. So I expect Jerami Grant to be back in a Blazer uniform next year. Damian Lillard said he expects Jerami Grant to be back in a Blazer uniform next year. Jerami Grant said he likes it here, and depending on this offseason, if the Blazers can make a splash, then I'd absolutely expect Jerami Grant to be back. The only way I could see Jerami Grant leaving is if the Blazers fail this offseason and Dame starts hinting at wanting out and telling Jerami Grant that he might want out, and basically just the most apocalyptic scenario. However, I just don't think that's realistic at all, so I expect Jerami Grant back in a Blazer uniform next season. As far as what Grant should work on, I mean, rebounding and screen navigation. I don't know how he can work on his rebounding, but I really want him to be a better rebounder than he was this past year. And then if he is able to get through screens, then it would be more acceptable for Chauncey Billups to put him against some of the better guards in the league if he could at least stay attached to them fighting through on-ball screens. My grade for Jerami Grant this season was a B+. He was better than I expected. The defensive stuff I expected. This is exactly what I expected out of Jerami Grant as a defensive player. However, he scored the ball while still fitting in next to Damian Lillard and Anthony Simons a little better than I expected, and was more efficient than I expected this season, both from 2 and from 3. The three-point shooting was phenomenal all year long. He had some bad moments later on in the season in terms of some subpar shooting performances, and there was a stretch where he just could not make a 3 in the fourth quarter, but he had a couple big-time clutch plays to start the season when the Blazers were playing really well, and he was phenomenal at the start of the year. He looked like the best third option in the league at the start of the year, so I'm going to give Jerami Grant a B+. Anyway, let me know what you would grade Grant down in the comment section below. Let me know what you think of his season. Are you comfortable paying him a 5-year, $150 million extension? At this point, I think the Blazers have to give him it because they can't afford to lose Jerami Grant for absolutely nothing, which would be the alternative. At this point, you got to pay him. When the Blazers traded for him, they had to be comfortable with what was to come in terms of his free agency, and now that's here, and they got to give the man his bag. Anyway, that wraps up this video. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you in the next couple player reviews. There's only 2 left. Anthony Simons and Damian Lillard. Those should be dropping tomorrow. I got to wrap these up in these past couple of days. So if you've missed any, check the playlist in the description box below. And with that being said, I'm out of here. I'll catch you in the next one. Until then, as always, peace out. Go Blazers.